Hey everybody, I'm Sherry Seligson and today is Tuesday. We're going to continue our time together talking about some fun science stuff. I'm going to review a little bit about what we did yesterday. We're going to do some more stuff today. We're transitioning a little bit more about plants. We're still sticking with botany, but I'm also going to pull in some composition, some Bible, and some crafts again. Hopefully you guys can take from this whatever information you want and adjust it to fit the ages of your children. Yesterday we talked a lot about seeds, we talked about leaves. Remember the three parts of plants were roots and stems and leaves. We even did a fun little craft. I cut out my little leaf rubbings yesterday of some of the leaves that we did with our craft. And then I wanted to just give you an update on some of the seeds that we've been doing. You know, one of the fun things when you're doing any kind of experiments, it kind of hangs around for a while. And so I've got little various experiments in different stages, but I wanted to show you the two seeds that we did, or seed experiments that we did yesterday, and give you an update on where we are, okay? And also, if you guys could give me a comment if you're watching this, where you're from, so I know how the time zones are going, and if it would be better for us to adjust to a different time. But let me know in the comments. I would appreciate that. Yesterday, I showed you we had two different plants that we were growing, or groups of seeds that we were growing under different conditions. The only variable here between these two types of bean seeds was the number of seeds in the container. And so we have 3 seeds here, and you can see they've started to sprout. And then I have 15 seeds in this container, and just look at the crowding going on right there. All right, we're gonna see how that affects these plants starting to grow based on the difference. The only variable in this situation is number of seeds together, or the concentration of seeds in the same amount of soil. So also, if you're doing this at home, let me know. Send me a picture of what you're doing as well. Just answer or comment in this video so we'll know what's going on. And then also, if you have any other ideas of things as we're working through this, you can put that in the comments too, because then we all can learn from that. I'm going to continue to put comments after this video in this in this series of videos, so that you can see other things that you can use to pull in to the study here. The other thing we were doing yesterday was looking at a variable of the presence of light and how that affects sprouts to grow. And so I have some seeds here that have been planted in a tray, and they're sprouting. You can see some small little seed leaves growing. These are from radish seeds. It only takes a couple of days for these guys to sprout and start to grow. They're green, they're kind of little heart-shaped leaves. And then I have the same number of seeds in the same amount of soil, but in the other container, I have been keeping a box over it and doing it in the dark. And so these have sprouted in the dark, and you can see they're a lot taller. They're also, the leaves are very light green in color, and that really means that they're not able to photosynthesize well. They don't have any access to sunlight. But interestingly, they're taller. And if you think about it, the plant's goal is to try to get its leaves in exposure to the sun so they can start to produce food for the plant. There's initially some food in the seeds of that plant, so that when the seed is ready to sprout, and that little seedling is just sprouting out of the seed, it's feeding off of nutrition that's built into that seed, which is why it's healthy for us to eat seeds, because we get that nutrition when we do that. But once that food runs out in the seed, then it's up to the plant to start utilizing photosynthesis to take energy from the sun and make its own food. And so because the seeds that are in the dark aren't having access to solar energy, they can't make food. And so the plant is taking all of its energy now in its desire to try to grow as fast as possible and get into a location where it can get sun. And that's why those seeds are sprouting much taller, more rapidly. Of course, that means all of its energies are doing that. It's probably not taking the time to build good, solid root systems, whereas these short little guys are doing that as well. So we'll take a look at these again tomorrow. We're going to come back again tomorrow at the same time and take a look at how they're both doing. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit more about what the stems do when it comes to a plant. And I have a really cool setup here. I mentioned yesterday there's a vascular system, or tubes, that plants use to take in water, to send nutrients around their bodies. And those are tubes that are called xylem and phloem. Xylem, X-Y-L-E-M, is responsible for transporting water and minerals that the plant takes in from the soil up into the plant. And phloem, P-H-L-O-E-M, takes the nutrients and brings those nutrients down from the photosynthesizing cells down into the rest of the plant. So xylem and phloem, and the way I remember that, xylem is XY, and it's responsible for water transport. So WXY, they all go together. And then phloem is PH, but it's the F sound, and so phloem is for food. So xylem and phloem are the two vessels, vascular vessels, that are used for transportation within a plant. And so we're going to utilize that and take a look at what's going on. One fun thing, you've probably done this before, where you take a flower and you stick it in colored water, and then overnight or the next day or so, you can begin to see the coloration of the water in the tops of the flowers. And it works really well with carnations. I only have a pink carnation, so I'm going to stick that, have a glass of blue food coloring in water and red food coloring in water. I'm just going to put this one in the blue, and we're going to let that sit overnight. I also did something where I took this flower, and I'm not sure how it's going to work because some flowers do better with this than others, but I split. You can see I took a knife and just carefully split down the center. Let's see if you can do it in front of me. You can see it better. Split down the center, and so one side is going in the red, the other side is going in the blue, and it's only been in this container for a couple of hours, so we're not seeing anything in the petals of the flower yet. But looking closely, when I open it up, you can see that there's red moving. I can actually see the red movement of the water going up this side and the blue up this side. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see that or not, but that's okay if you can't. Try this at home. You can do this with celery. Celery is a great way to observe the movement of the xylem, or the xylem, the water up the xylem. And that way you can test it at home. Just let it sit overnight, and next thing you know, you're going to see the colors. Try to get an opposite color than whatever you're using. So if you're going to use celery, don't use green food coloring because you're not going to be able to see it. If you have blue food coloring, that would work ideally. Red also. And again, that's why I have this pink flower in the blue, because if I put my pink flower in my red, it's really not going to show very much. So that's something fun to do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the mechanism of how that works. You know, when we have blood vessels in our bodies, and those blood vessels transport blood throughout our body, which helps us get our nutrients and get rid of waste. But we have a heart that pumps very sharply, very, very regularly from the moment we are basically a couple weeks old inside of our mamas, continually pulsing, moving that blood through our system to keep that circulation going. Well, plants don't have that. One way that they can utilize the water moving upward is they use the property of water. The property of water is very important. Water has something called surface tension. And I meant to do something with surface tension. Maybe we'll have to do that tomorrow. The surface tension of water. And what it is it has to do with the fact that water molecules are slightly positively charged on one end and slightly negatively charged on the other. Some of you may know that the molecule of water is H2O, which is 2 atoms of hydrogen. That's the 2 part. And O is for oxygen, 1 atom of oxygen. And they kind of look like, I like to make this little fist and fingers like this. This would be my oxygen molecule, my fist. And this would be the extension that goes to hydrogen, and this is the other hydrogen. And because oxygen is so much of a bigger atom than the little hydrogens, it has a stronger pull on the negative electrons in that molecule of water. And so one side of the water molecule is slightly negative, the other side is slightly positive. And so when 2 water molecules come together, they like to stick next to each other. The positive to the negative, they draw each other together in this kind of motion like this. And so it has a stickiness to it. It's called hydrogen bonding, and it's not like a regular bond in a molecule, but the water molecules will stay together and stick. And because of that, water has this tension over the top of it that's called surface tension. It also is sticky, and it can do something called capillary action, where it moves upwards. It kind of gets sucked up like a straw in narrow containers, like the xylem of flowers. So I have right here just a cup of water, and I want to, you can do this at home. It's really kind of fun to do. I'm going to take some red food coloring, just put a couple drops in, and swirl it around a little bit. I'm actually going to use, I've got a little stick here. I'll stir around with that. There we go. Okay, and then I've got a paper towel. I wish I could see my comments. Hey everybody, I'm looking at seeing some comments. All right, so I have this paper towel just folded up, and if you stick just the tip in and watch, you're going to see water traveling up the paper towel. I mean, there's no heart in there pumping it, but it's moving because of the hydrogen bonding. One water molecule gets stuck in there in the tiny little fibers of the paper towel. It pulls the next one with it. It's attracted to the next one with it. And so it continues to move upward. And you can even do something fun with this. I'm going to tear my towel like this and have a little box right here. I'm going to put my water up here on the box. And while we're talking, I have an empty cup, and I'm going to bend my towel like this. And we're gonna just let it sit while we're talking today. And we're gonna see what happens. Now you can kind of see the water that's already moving upward via capillary action. Once it gets over here, think about what's gonna happen. If you're gonna do this with your kids, ask them, hypothesize, what do you think will happen and why? And then you can observe it and see if they're actually, if it's actually happening. So I'm just gonna push it over here so you can observe what's going on with that. Now, I also have something we're gonna do tomorrow, and maybe we'll tie this into our surface tension and hydrogen bonding that we'll do tomorrow as well. I have an egg that, it's a raw egg, and I put it in just a coffee mug that has vinegar in it, just regular vinegar. Now, if you notice it's all bubbly and there's this white stuff all over it, what happens is vinegar is a slight acid, and it will start to dissolve the calcium carbonate of the shell of the egg. And so if you leave it in here overnight, there will be a very fun surprise in the morning. What we're gonna see is there's a fine membrane inside, just inside the shell of the egg, that enables water to move through freely, but other chemicals have a harder time getting through it. It's called a semipermeable membrane. If you've ever hard-boiled an egg and peeled it, you'll actually see that membrane sometimes just under the shell. It's a clear, thin membrane. Well, we're actually going to dissolve the shell, and then we can look at that membrane and we can do some things to see how water flows in and out of that membrane. That's called osmosis. Now, there's two types of movement across a semipermeable membrane. A semipermeable membrane is kind of like a colander, okay? It's a mesh. It allows some things to get through and not others. So if you're rinsing a bunch of, I don't know, some beans in a colander, the beans are too big to fit through the holes, right? But water will go through the holes. And so that's kind of like what a semi-permeable membrane is. And so it will allow certain chemicals in and out, but not all of them. Osmosis is when water travels from areas of low concentration to high concentration of materials. So if there's a lot of stuff dissolved, which like inside of our egg, there's a lot of materials dissolved in the liquid of that egg. And if we put that egg in just plain water, the water outside the egg is going to want to move in to dilute the material inside via osmosis. So we're going to let this sit overnight, and then tomorrow we're going to come back and take a look at what's going on. So join me tomorrow again, 11 o'clock, we'll try this again, and we'll do some more. So that's something we're going to talk about again tomorrow. Now, because we're talking a little bit about water, and we've been talking about botany, I want to pull in as many different kinds of things as we can, or topics, into our discussion so you guys can take this and go with it and make it more of a fun, enjoyable, educational activity, non-screen involving activity that you can do. And I love when we talk about water and how plants utilize water, because it's really a part of the water cycle that is in our world, the ecosystem, the cycles and the cyclic nature of materials that recycle themselves around. And water is one of those. And it's a fascinating thing, because what happens is there's three major terms in the water cycle. Water will heat up, like imagine at the ocean or on the lake, water gets warm, little tiny molecules will evaporate, okay, and they'll move up into the air. As those molecules cool, they will condense, or condensation. So you have evaporation, then condensation means they turn back into tiny little water droplets and form clouds. And then if enough of those water droplets build up, they will rain in something called precipitation. If it's cold, it will snow. That's another type of precipitation. And so think about those three ations. We have evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. And that forms the water cycle that all of our plants need, that we need to survive. But interestingly, and here's the connection that I think is fascinating. I want you to think about the history of this. There's a gentleman named Bernard Palissy, and he back in, I have my notes here, the late 1500s, was able to observe this cycle of water. He was the first one to describe, define, understand that there is indeed this cyclical nature of water movement throughout our ecosystems of the world. And so, in fact, the scientific community didn't even recognize it as an actual thing until the late 1800s. But I want to read to you a clip from the book of Job. This is chapter 36, verses 27 and 28. For he draws up the drops of water, they distill his mist and rain, which the skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. Okay, Job 36, verses 27 to 28. Let me read it again. He draws up the drops of water. Ooh, that sounds like evaporation. They distill. That means they condense his mist in rain, which the skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. That is precipitation. Draws up the drops of water, evaporation, distill, condensation, and skies pour down, precipitation. That is fascinating. The hydrologic cycle, the continuation, the cyclical nature of water movement was written about, was described in the book of Job 2,000 years before Christ, okay? Way beforehand. There is such amazing truths and scientific facts that are found in the Bible. And I love when I bump into those things and when I learn about those things. So we can understand that this is something that God knew about from the beginning. God designed this cycle. He is in making that cycle happen so that we can benefit from it, so the plants can grow. And so I just really, really love reading about that in Job. Okay, the last thing we're going to do, we're going to end in a craft because I love doing crafts, and I think those are fun. And I had fun with this. This is a craft you may have done before, but I wanted to just remind you that you can be doing something, and this might be something your kids would enjoy doing. So what I did was I got just an egg carton. We're going to make a flower, make some flowers, because we're talking about flowers today a little bit and how they need water, and they take that water in. And so I just got a regular egg carton. You can use the styrofoam ones as well, but mine is one of those recycled paper kind. And I cut out just the shape that holds the egg, the little cups. I'm going to show you one of them. And I colored it, and I used marker. Okay, so I cut one out, and I colored it. I colored the 4 points like petals, and I used marker, but I checked. You can use crayon. Crayons work well on this as well. You could use paint if you want to get the paints out. Go right ahead and do that. But I used marker, and it worked really well. Crayons work well, and I wanted to do that with a couple of them. And then you can take your two, and you can nest them together where the points are alternating one to another. And you see that, how it makes kind of a nice lily shape? You guys can get the kids to do this and make some Easter decorations. Easter lilies are beautiful. Let them color them whatever they want. And then we want to put something in the middle. So you can go outside. Don't go to the store for this. I'm trying to come up with things where you don't have to go to the store, where you're not actually having to go and get around people. We're trying to do things to help everybody stay at home. But get them outside. Let them go collect some sticks to make the stems of their flowers. Let them collect some leaves. You can even glue some leaves on. But I have a skewer, and so I'm just going to carefully poke this. If you guys are using a skewer, obviously mom and dad do that. Don't let the kids do that. But I'm poking it through. I also have some clay. I think I made some, well, here we go. I'll just take the clay here. I'm just going to take a small piece of clay. You can use Play-Doh if you want. You can stick that through the skewer. You can put it in here just to kind of hold it. If you have green clay, that would even be more realistic, obviously. And I'm just kind of molding it up to hold it. And then we need something in the middle. You can glue buttons. You could glue some beans in there if you have some extra beans. I'm going to take another piece of clay for mine and just stick that in the middle for my flower. And you make a whole bunch of these and have a beautiful spring vase that will keep the kids occupied to make. They can be creative, come up with other ways you can make flowers. It's really kind of a fun activity to do. And so hopefully all of this stuff gets your brain going, gets you thinking. I'm going to again try to find some things that will help just dovetail into these lessons, and I'll try to put the links in the comments section of this video. I'll put some more stuff up on my page. I'm going to continue to try to be doing these things for the next week or so, and so I really want to come alongside of you guys and just give you ideas, maybe just give you guys something for your kids to watch, and maybe the kids will come up with ideas, and maybe grab some books that might go along with this, or something that we could read together. I was thinking about reading stories, but I think that there's some sort of copyright issue if I do that, so I don't want to break a copyright by reading someone's textbook, or not textbook, but storybook online. But anyway, if you think of books, or you have some books that are great to go with these kinds of things we're talking about, put a comment in the comment section. I'm also going to try to transition out of botany in a couple of days, and maybe we'll do some marine biology. I know everybody loves talking about marine animals. I love talking about marine animals. I'm a marine biologist, and we can do something like that as well. So, and if you have a request, give me a request, shoot me a message. Thank you all for the comments that I've been getting, the instant messages I've been getting, just the encouragement in this. This has just been so fun for me to do, and I hope it really blesses you too. So join me this time again tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern time, and we'll do some more stuff. We'll check back and see how all our other stuff is doing as well. And just push the button. There we go.